I thank Deputy Boyd Barrett for bringing this motion, because and I'll respond formally in a second, but I actually watched quite a lot of this. I was very interested in it. Both Deputy Boyd Barrett and I share a constituency adjacent to much of where this work happens, and many of the people that live in our constituency are involved both in the production and the work in this industry, and it's a matter of great importance to both of us. And for that reason, I took an interest in the hearings insofar as I could without being a member, and I was very interested in the range of both producers and workers' representatives that attended before the committee and gave different perspectives. And I know that Deputy Boyd Barrett has a very strong perspective articulated here today. Myself, I thought that what happened in the committee was broader than the depiction by Deputy Boyd Barrett today. I thought it was a broader reflection of experience, but Deputy Boyd Barrett and I might have different perspectives on this as other things, but I think it's important to say that in the interest of balance, and also in the interest of reflecting, I think, the full report, which of course both I and Deputy McGrath have read in full, on a range of different issues, not just the direct tax issue, but questions around employment. I am an employment law solicitor by background. I am familiar with fixed-term workers provisions at EU law and their application in Irish law, and I'm also aware about the complexity with which multiple contracts with different entities, how the complexity of that can come into operation in any individual cases. So that's there for individual cases to be resolved, and not for me here, except simply to note the complexity of it and the difference between having a single entity and successive contracts, and perhaps contracts with multiple entities at the same time as having successive contracts. But that's a broad observation on my part. More broadly, I think the question of the value to the state from this tax credit, I mean, and I think what Deputy Boyd Barrett has said there is that the state gets nothing, and I just have to refute that, because the state, wherever the state is deriving employment, it is getting something. Wherever the state is deriving employment into different regions of the country, especially outside of Dublin, it is getting something. And wherever the state is finding ways to develop a resilient economy based in multiple sectors of employment and not single points of failure or an over-reliance on one, the state is getting something in terms of building up its resilience. And actually, I think that this industry, the government recognises the remarkable achievements of the screen industry and everybody who works there to date, and the genuine economic and cultural impact it has generated for us both domestically and internationally. And over the years, the industry has demonstrated adaptability, determination, resilience and innovation. The Irish skills in this sector has achieved outstanding international success over the last decade. In 2023, there was an unprecedented number of Academy Award nominations for Irish skills, for Irish people working in this field, including a historic Best International Feature Academy Award nomination for the Irish language film on Colleen Kuhn. The global impact of films such as The Banshees of Inisherin, whether you liked it or you didn't like it, was supported by the Section 481 tax incentive, and has also demonstrated the outstanding worldwide reach and influence of Irish stories on screen. Major successful international films and TV drama has also been produced in Ireland, and I certainly see with great pride Irish names on international films and recognise the contribution that Ireland is making to this sector. Some of those productions demonstrate the cultural dividend in the Irish film sector, showcasing Irish skill and creativity while promoting Irish screen tourism on a global scale. And in particular, the Irish animation sector has continued to go from strength to strength. In the past 15 years, Irish post-production and visual effects has become a leading hub for large-scale productions, underpinned by a highly skilled local talent pool of skills to call upon. Irish VFX work is globally recognised and competes at the highest level internationally. And that highly skilled workforce is incredibly important. It's incredibly important to protect it, it's incredibly important to acknowledge it, and it's incredibly important to generate an industry where it will be capable of working for decades to come in a resilient way. We want an industry where people can train, we want an industry where people can develop skills and choose to continue to work in Ireland, or indeed take opportunities internationally as they may arise. Ireland's unique position, in particular as an English-speaking European Union centre of excellence for screen production, I hope will continue to attract high-quality inward production activity supported by the Section 481 tax incentive. Much of the success the industry has achieved is the culmination of long-term investment in the skills of Irish people, but it is also the result of continued funding, as the Deputy has said, for Screen Ireland, and indeed the Section 481 tax incentive for film and television production. There was a cost-benefit analysis of the scheme undertaken in advance of Budget 2023, resulting in an estimated net economic cost for the year reviewed of 78.54 million. However, while that cost-benefit analysis indicates a cost to the Exchequer, it must also be recognised that the primary purpose of the relief is to contribute to the development, enhancement and promotion of Irish European culture. Projecting the work of Irish productions to audiences around the world conveys the message that Ireland is a country with a rich history and a thriving cultural community. Recognition of these productions at a global level enhances Ireland's international reputation as a location to live, visit and work in. And that cultural dividend is of genuine benefit to Ireland, even though we can never really quantify it in an economic analysis of the scheme. Deputies may also be aware that last year's Finance Bill provided for the extension of Section 481 from its current end date of 31 December 2024 to 31 December 2028. And that extension is, of course, subject to European Commission approval. Extension of the relief in advance of the sunset date demonstrates this government's commitment to the Irish audiovisual industry and is intended to provide certainty regarding the future availability of the relief. That certainty will foster further confidence in Ireland as a centre of excellence for screen production, because of course these things are not planned year on year, but on a much longer basis. There are a number of recommendations in the committee's report in relation to enhancing the competitiveness of the credit, specifically with regard to the extension of the regional uplift and increasing the cap on eligible expenditure, which I thought were very important and interesting. In relation to the regional uplift and the cap on eligible expenditure, both of those are budget items and the committee's recommendations, I assure you, will be given due consideration in advance of budget 2024. The regional uplift piece is particularly important and was introduced in the Finance Act 2018 as a short-term or tapered uplift for productions being made in areas designated under the state aid regional guidelines. That's now in its final year of operation. The uplift was originally designed to provide an increased level of credit for 4 years, with 5% available in year 1 and 2, 2019 and 20, 3% available in year 3, 2% available in year 4. Finance Act 2020 then amended the regional uplift to provide for an additional 5% in 2021 in recognition of the negative impact of the pandemic. And then the tapered withdrawal of the uplift restarted in 2022 with a reduction to 3% and now 2% in 2023. And the committee, obviously, with regard to the proposal to extend and amend the uplift, I do understand that discussions before the committee highlighted some of the practical impediments to such proposals. The uplift received state aid approval on the basis that it was short-term. Tapered support designed to stimulate the development of new pools of talent in the regions. It's not EU regional aid, but it uses the EU regional aid map for Ireland as a means to identify geographic areas in which the relief is available. Deputies may be aware that a new and geographically more limited regional aid map for Ireland has now been approved by the European Commission, and it's expected that any further extension or amendment of the existing credit would, if granted state aid approval, it would be governed by this more limited geographic scope. In terms of the cap on eligible expenditure, so that cap, as deputies are aware, was increased from 50 million to 70 million in 2016. It was considered at the time that the increase to 70 million struck an appropriate balance between providing sufficient increase to attract big budget productions, while also being, of course, mindful to the possible cost to the public finances if such films were to come to Ireland. As I have stated, as to whether now is the time to increase the cap, and I thought the committee's recommendation was very important in relation to this. It will be a matter for consideration in advance of budget 2024. I believe any amendment would also require state aid approval to come into effect. But I should say that this again comes down to a cost-benefit analysis of what we think we might be able to attract to Ireland and the tax foregone and the balance struck therein, which is of course a conversation that the committee went into in some detail. On the question of other elements of the committee's recommendations, employment rights, copyright, DAC, lifespan and so on, many of those issues are cut across policy areas of government departments, and particularly the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment, Department of Tourism, Culture, Gaeltacht, Arts, Sports and Media. There is a particular focus on areas of employment rights in the audiovisual sector and copyright protections for the intellectual property of creatives such as actors, writers and composers. In relation to employment rights, the Deputy will be aware that changes were made to the film tax credit to reinforce the requirement to adhere to employment right legislation. As part of the cultural certification process, an applicant company is required to submit an undertaking of compliance with all relevant employment legislation. That commits applicants to compliance with all relevant employment legislation in relation to the film being certified. Those conditions are to be met not just by the producer company, but also, as the Deputy has said, by the designated activity company that is required to be set up for each production in order to avail of Section 481. With regard to the recommendation to extend the life of DACs to 3 years post-completion of a project, I think from a practical point of view, certain obligations remain even where it should be noted from a practical point of view that certain obligations remain even where a company is no longer active, including, for example, the filing of annual accounts. So there is a question about the additional costs and how disproportionately negative, how that might impact disproportionately on smaller productions and smaller DACs set up, who of course are more vulnerable in many ways than some of the larger entities. It's also worth noting that company law contains provisions whereby companies can be restored, including by courts in circumstances where there's actually a legal claim against the company. So for those reasons, it's not clear exactly that the proposal would deliver the desired benefit, and but it's a matter that will be kept under review. With regard to the quality of employment, Ireland has a very comprehensive body of employment, equality and industrial relations legislation, which offer the same protections to all employees legally employed under a contract of employment. All employers, regardless of sector, are responsible for ensuring that their employees receive all protections afforded them under employment legislation. The Protection of Employees Fixed-Term Workers Act 2003 provides for the improvement of quality of fixed-term work by ensuring the application of the principle of non-discrimination. That is, as the Deputy knows, fixed-term workers may not be treated less favourably than comparable permanent workers. The Act also provides for the establishment of a framework to prevent abuse arising from the use of successive fixed-term employment contracts. And we saw the particular question that arose, for example, in universities, for example, where somebody was working with the same entity year on year on year. If an employee who commenced employment on a fixed-term contract basis on or after 14th July 2003 had 2 or more fixed-term contracts, as everybody is aware, the combined duration shall not exceed 4 years. After this, if the employer wishes to continue, it must be a contract of indefinite duration, unless the employer has objective grounds for renewing the contract on a fixed-term basis. Where if a fixed-term employee feels that he or she is being treated less favourably as regards the conditions of employment than a comparable permanent employee, or if he or she considers that he or she is entitled to a contract of indefinite duration and the employer refuses to concede that, it's open to the employee to refer the matter to the Director General of the Workplace Relations Commission. In tandem with these legislative provisions, there is also the opportunity for collective agreements as an efficient and effective way to improve standardised working practices in the sectors. I know that a modernised crew agreement was agreed and introduced in January 2021, which promotes good practices, regularises evolving work practices and provides for an industry pension scheme operating under the Construction Workers Pension Scheme. The agreement includes a monitoring structure to oversee the operation of the agreement and a commitment to developing the first work-life balance policy for the film and television industry. It acts as a framework for the industry covering all crew grades except film construction, which I understand were subject to separate negotiation. Following the conclusion of those separate negotiations, last year Screen Producers Ireland and the ICTU Film Construction Group of Unions secured a construction crew agreement which encompasses up to 300 construction crew in the independent film and TV construction sector. The agreement provides for increased hourly pay rates and a range of other matters. Other important measures include sick leave, coverage for pension, other benefits for industry construction workers, and the establishment of a new joint monitoring structure to ensure implementation. The introduction of those 2 industry agreements demonstrates that the Irish audiovisual industry is collaborative and a positive place to work, though I know the Deputy takes issue with that in respect of the people he's representing. In relation to intellectual property rights, copyright is relevant for many workers in the film sector, including authors, producers, broadcasters, in addition to actors. I have been informed that the Screen Ireland has engaged an independent facilitator to meet with key stakeholders, as the Deputy has alluded to understand the various perspectives of those concerned, and stakeholder meetings have recently been held. On the next phase, it will progress to group discussions. It's worth noting relevant copyright legislation applies in any event. Finally, the final report is a stakeholder forum. I might come back to that in my closing remarks, but I would say that I think there's a overall question. I thought the report was extremely balanced. I thought it reflected the multiple perspectives of the people that came before the hearings of the committee. There was multiple employee views respected or worker perspectives reflected, multiple producer perspectives reflected, and there's something of a balance between the different genuinely creating a resilient industry that will stick in Ireland Ireland that will offer training and employment in an ongoing way to anybody who wants to come into that sector, to give them the opportunity to work within a really vibrant Irish industry, to give a platform to go and travel internationally to the multiple other locations that are creating excellent film and television around the world. But in my view, the best way of doing that is to create a sector where there is multiple job opportunities, where employees have the opportunity to choose the type of structure that they can work within, where they have the opportunity to engage in collective bargaining, and where they are protected in that way. I think the report alludes to much of that, but I hope the debate will too.